So I've started recording, and we're gonna pick up from where we left off on Monday. So welcome everyone. This is the second session for the front end squad. And today we're gonna, so last week we looked at HTML. But before we went into HTML, we looked at setting up Angular, right? To set up a new Angular app. We looked at how to start your Angular development environment or the server with ng-serve, right? And you also remember that if you do ng-serve -- open, it will start the server and open a browser, right? For Windows users, we did find a problem with running ng-serve in Visual Studio Code, so you would typically do that in a terminal. Now, you have Git Bash if you've installed Git client, and Git Bash is the preferred terminal. So whenever we talk about the terminal now, let's use Git Bash. And it's very easy to open Git Bash up to the project folder. What you just do is you go in File Explorer on Windows, right? Browse to the Classroom folder and right-click and then open in a clear part of it. Don't right-click on the file, but right-click on anywhere in the Classroom folder and select Git Bash here. Okay, so, and that will open up Git Bash in the Classroom folder. Now, once you do that, it's easy to open up Visual Studio Code in that same Classroom folder. You just type code space period, and that opens up Visual Studio Code in the Classroom folder. All right. Now, once you have Visual VS Code open in the Classroom folder, remember you go to View Terminal to open up the terminal. Okay. Now, for Angular, we are going to be working in the web app folder. That's where we're going to be doing our work. And so you can right-click in Visual Studio Code. Can you see my screen, everyone? Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Not everyone else.
All right. So in VS Code, you right-click on Web App, and you can say Open in Terminal, and that opens up the Web App folder in the terminal here. So that's an easy way of getting right there. And remember to start Angular, just do ng-s, and that starts up an Angular application. Now I do have an exception here, which is probably a problem with my Angular JSON. So someone, I believe, committed a bad Angular.json file. And so a lot of people have been having this error. So if you have this error, this is what is wrong here. This is an unresolved merge conflict. Now, if I say git status, right, it doesn't tell me I have an unresolved merge conflict here. So someone committed this. Someone committed this file this way. So, but to fix this, I can just do that and that. But let me explain what is going on there, because this is a problem that we'll face at some point in the future. It's almost unavoidable. This is because two lines that are exactly the same have changed. The one in the head section, so you have two sections and they're delimited by this series of equal signs. There are two sections. This is the local, and this is what's coming in. All right? But they're exactly the same line. So you can see they're almost identical. They're not quite identical. The value there is different, but they're almost identical. And so when you want to resolve a conflict, you need to select one of the two. So if you want to keep your local changes that's competing with the one coming in, you would take what's in the head part of it. If you want to take the changes that are coming in from outside, which is the changes from this, you would take the part that's after the equal signs. The changes could be multiple lines. Sometimes it's multiple lines, sometimes it's only one line. In this case, it's only one line. So I'm going to keep what's in my head section, and I'm going to delete what's coming in, right? And then I need to commit those changes. So I'm going to do a git commit -am, and my message would be just resolved merge conflicts in angular.json, right? That's my message. Git pull, git push. Okay, so I've resolved that conflict, and now I can do my NGS and start up my Angular server. Now, NGS is shortcut for ng serve, and there are many shortcuts. We're going to learn more Angular CLI commands, and most of them have a shortcut version because it's just so you don't have to type so much. So ng serve, you just do ng space s, and that starts up your Angular server. If I wanted to do the serve, right, and open it up in a browser, so let me just kill some of these here. The shortcut for that is ng s-o. That's the same thing as ng serve -open. Okay, and it opens up a browser and takes us to the page that we have. All right. Okay, so the objectives for today. Today we're going to learn a little more CSS, just a little more. We're going to learn, we're going to learn a little more HTML, right? We're going to learn CSS, and then we're going to get into the meat of Angular. We're going to learn about Angular components. And one stretch goal I will have for today is for us to actually be able to take this form that we have and submit it to the endpoint. Okay? So there are quite a few concepts that we're going to learn, but we're going to see about taking this form and actually trying to submit the data to a backend server. Remember, this form is just in the browser, so it's in the front end, right? It's on the local computer viewing it. But now I want to submit the data captured in the form to a server. Okay? So that's our goal for today.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, I have this error. Your global Angular CLI version 9.17 is better than your local version 9.16.
Okay.
Can
you save?
Angular,
Yeah.
okay.
Can you save the question for later, because that's going to distract from the track I'm on right now.
Okay. No problem.
Okay. Yeah. So please let's follow. I'll stop and pause for questions, but I want to get through as much as possible. All right. Okay. So that's the goal for today, right? So let's jump in and look at just some more HTML. We'll do a little bit of a refresher. We'll use that to refresh what we've learned about HTML, and then go from there into CSS, okay? So remember when we talked about HTML, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And it's a markup language because you use it to mark up content, essentially layout content. Remember, you have block elements and you have inline elements, right? Remember that block elements are block elements because they take an entire line on the screen. And then inline elements can stay side by side, right? You can also think of block elements can also be containers. And remember, I said that when you have an HTML tag inside another HTML tag, who remembers what that's called? Anyone? When you have one HTML tag inside another HTML tag.
Nested.
They are nested. It's called nesting. So the one tag is nested inside the other. okay? So it's called nesting. An HTML tag can contain other HTML tags. It works like a container. So you can have a paragraph that contains a hyperlink in it, or a paragraph that contains an image in it, or a div that contains a hyperlink and an image and a button, okay? The most popular container tag that we'll be using is the div, essentially a division. And use that to lay out blocks of the screen. Now, when we learn CSS, we're going to see how you can lay them out and align them. Okay, could you excuse me for 1 second? Just 1 second.
Yeah, hello, Wale, please. We have some people in the corridor. Could you please allow them in?
Yeah, Yinka is the host.
Oh, okay.
We haven't figured out how to make multiple people hosts yet. So if so I don't have that privilege just yet.
Okay, I would like to.
All right.
Yinka, there's some people.
I've admitted them already.
Oh, cool.
Right. Okay, so we'll proceed. So block elements, inline elements. An HTML container type element can contain other elements. We looked at unordered lists and ordered lists, right? The ordered list is a UL tag, and it contains list items, which are li tags, right? And you remember that we said a tag, most elements require an opening and a closing tag. But certain elements that just drop something on the screen, rather than contain stuff, right, don't require a closing tag. Okay, so elements like the image tag has no closing tag because it drops an image on the screen, right? An element like there's a line break tag that just drops a line break horizontal rule on the screen, or there's a line break tag that actually just creates a line break, forces a line break after an inline element. There's so many elements. We looked at it, we saw the input tag, which is what we used, right, to create these form fields. They just drop an element on the screen. So they don't have closing because they don't wrap around anything. And then if we have a tag that wraps around text, like the H, like the heading tags, the H1, H2, H3, they wrap around text. So you have to have an opening and a closing to say what the tag affects. That's typically what opening and closing does, is it tells you how far that effect or what that tag affects or what it contains. Okay? Any questions so far? Refresher? All right. So we're going to jump in here. And then, sorry, before we also jump in, remember we also talked about attributes. And attributes are how you add properties to an element or to a tag. So for example, we have these buttons. And we added the attribute of submit to this to make it a submit button. And we added an attribute of disabled to make it disabled, right? And you remember this text area here, we added an attribute of rows and set the value to 5 to make it have 5 rows, right? And some of these fields, the password fields, we added an attribute of type and set it to password to make it a password field so that the characters we type in are masked. That's because the type of this input is set to password and it is set with an attribute. Okay, so that's what attributes do. They help to modify a tag or provide more details and more information about it. You also have attributes like name attribute, which is typically used for form fields, right? Or like form elements. You have the ID attribute. We'll get to that when we get into CSS. The ID attribute is important there's a class attribute. We'll also talk about that in CSS, but if you just remember what an attribute is. And so I'm going to come into here to Visual Studio Code, and we're going to look at the elements that we have, because we're going to look at the elements that we have and have a visual sense of it. Now, when our Angular app is in the web app folder, okay, because that's where we initialized Angular, was inside the web app folder. So the code that we control, that we write, everything that we write and all that is in the source folder. That's our source code for our app. And the first component, so the module that we're working on right now is called, the component, the initialized component that's there from the get-go is the app component, right? This is our app. There's a module and there's a component, and I'll explain the difference between a module and a component shortly when we get into Angular details. But if we look at our app component.html, right? This is the main component that loads when our application starts. And inside that HTML, so there are different pieces that make up this whole component. There's HTML, there's the SAS, which is actually dynamic CSS, we'll talk about that. There's a test file, and there's a component TypeScript file, which is the JavaScript for the component. In a few minutes, we're going to actually use those and work with those. But for now, let's just look at the HTML that we have and quickly remember what HTML is like. Remember our tags, less than and greater than. Between the less than and the greater than sign, it's a tag. This is an attribute. This is the tag. So this is the button tag with a type attribute, right? This is a label tag with a for attribute. And this for helps it connect to this text area tag, which has an ID attribute that it matches what's in the for. You get used to this. You can't memorize this, right? You will use it and use it over and over and over again, and then it will just become natural. All right? So these are the HTML tags. All right. What we're going to do next, right, is this is our app module. Let's just quickly look at how to create a table, just for a little more HTML, and then we'll come in and play with some CSS. So first, I'm going to add here at the top, right? I'm going to add an H1 here. I'll call this sign up, right? And when I save this here, notice it's automatically updated here. Because if you remember, Angular, once you save a change, it refreshes the browser. It actually communicates with the browser and it reloads the page. So it saves you from having to manually come here and refresh it yourself. So we're going to create a table. And so who can guess what the tag for a table is?
Table.
All right. So table. Now table has an attribute called width. I'm just going to set the width to 100%. Okay. And VS Code has closed the table for me. Now, what do tables typically have? A table is like your Excel sheet, right? So for those who've used Excel, what do you typically have? You have rows and columns, right?
Columns and rows.
Now, in an Excel sheet or a typical table, you have column headers, right? And then you have your data, you have your records in the table. So in HTML, to define the header section, there's actually a tag called thead or table head, right? And then there's a tag called T body for the body of the table. Okay. Each row in a table is a table row, so that's a TR tag, which is a table row tag. Okay. And for headers, we can then have table header, which is the individual headers now. So we can say SN, and I can come here, create another table header, which is first name, right? Create another table header, which is last name, and create another table header for gender, and one more table header for age. Okay, maybe we want one more for email, right? So we'll create one more table header for email. Okay, if I save this now, and we look here, look at that, I have a table, and I have the column headers. This defines how many columns I have in the table. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns because I have defined 6 columns here. Now if I come to the body, again the same thing. Each record is a what? What would that be? A table row, right? I can define a table row here. And then for each row, I now want to do, this is a different one now because that's a header. This is what's called a table division. That's how you create a cell. In Excel, they're called cells, right? In HTML, each cell is a table division. So now I'm going to do TD. This is my serial number. The order of the cells here must match the order of your headers here because it's going to create a table. So the columns must line up. So my first column is my serial number. My second column, which is another TD, would be John, right? Which is now my actual value. My third column, which is another TD, would be Doe, okay? And then my email, so another TD here, would be john@example.com, right? And then here, let's have another TD here, which is for my what? Gender, male. And then here, one more TD here. And this is going to be my age, 35. And if I save this here, look at what we have. We have John, Doe. Now they don't seem aligned, right? But they actually are. What's happening is that headings are centered and table cells are left aligned. Let's make the border show on our table. Who can guess what attribute that would be? Anyone?
Border width
Border.
or just border?
Let's just try border equals 1. Right? Let's try that. There. And so now you can visually see the table and you can see that they're actually in the same cells. Right? For our headings here, let's see if we can do something like them. Align equals left. Would that work? You see that? That's aligned all the headings left because I put it on the table row. And there are other, there are other attributes. If you look at the reference, you need to look at the reference. But if you look at the reference, there are other attributes that you can use. We can say cell padding. right? If I do the cell padding, you see that? It's put padding in the cell. If I do cell spacing, and I save that, you see that? It's put the spacing in the cells. All right? So that's kind of how attributes, you can see we're now using attributes to kind of tweak our table, you know? And if I want to add more rows to this table, I can just borrow this table row, and here I come and create another table row. I'm going to change this to Jane. Change the email address here to Jane. Change the age here, let's say to 32, and make this female. If I save that, we now have 2 rows. Oh, my serial number is wrong, so I'll change this to 2. All right, so this is an HTML table. So I'm just going to get rid of this. Now, look at this cell padding here that we have as 10. I can change it to 0. Yeah, my borders are nice and crisp. This gives me a table. Any questions so far? Okay.
Wait, sorry. The attributes of width and border, those are CSS elements that you also recommend that we put in an external file, right? As a best practice, or is this something that we have to do usually?
Well, we haven't talked about CSS at all yet.
No. I mean the attributes you put width and border and those CSS, or is that HTML?
So yes, so that's why I said we haven't talked about CSS at all.
Okay.
So in the grand scheme of things, for this world, at this particular point in time, CSS is not a thing. It doesn't exist.
Gotcha. I understand
so
now.
It is, so it is HTML.
Now. I understand.
Yes.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah. So those are attributes of the table element. Those attributes don't exist on every element. So if you look at tables, right? These are table tags. So here's a list of table tags. And let me see if there's a list of table attributes.
I think my question is whether the attributes are HTML or CSS.
So anything you put here in this form is HTML.
Gotcha.
Right. Anything, this is purely, once it's a value or something equals this in this manner, it's an HTML attribute.
I see.
Right. If you're going to write CSS, it's not going to be like this, but we'll get into CSS. But one way here is want to say HTML table attributes, right? You can Google that. And let's see, HTML table tag. And let's see what the attributes are. I believe there's a reference somewhere. I was hoping to find a list of attributes. Let's look somewhere else. Okay, here are the attributes. So this is in MDN, Mozilla Developer Network. And you can see the attributes here. You have align, background color, border, cell padding, cell spacing, frame, right, rules, etc. These are the attributes for table.
I see.
And these are the only attributes.
I see. And these are the attributes that the CSS file will edit. If you okay.
Right.
So
really we'll talk about CSS. Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. So wait. When we talk about CSS, it'll become clear.
So my next question is the next question is the serial number. Isn't there something we can write to automate that, or do we have?
There always is. That's what JavaScript is for.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
yeah, so we'll get there. We'll get there. So let's stick with the attribute concept right now. Attributes are purely HTML. You don't need any CSS, and every browser that supports that supports HTML fully will understand those attributes and interpret them the same. Okay, so they're standard, right? And that way, like you can see, we've made this table. Where is it? Somewhere at the end here. And it doesn't look like total crap. You know, when we first started, it looked all over the place. These weren't aligned. And with just the attributes, we got it to look better. But let's say we wanted it to look really pimping, right? We wanted to really style it. HTML is limited because HTML doesn't really care about looks. It cares more about placement, right? It's not big on looks. But we have CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets, which is how you make HTML look good. Okay? Cascading Style Sheets, CSS, is purely for looks, right? There's very little interactivity. I won't say there's none because there's some CSS instructions you can give that will respond to a hover. But in its purest form, CSS is for looks. It's really just about how things look on the screen. You can use it to also control what is visible and what's not. Okay, so CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And if you look at W3 schools, there's a CSS section there as well, right? Right there, pretty big. Stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Now, what does that mean? So let's talk about style sheets. A style sheet is a script that just contains styles, right? Visual instructions for HTML. So you have a button, and I want that button to be blue. I write CSS that says, make buttons blue. Okay, that's a style sheet. If I want the button to be 200 pixels wide, I write CSS that says, make it 200 pixels wide. HTML doesn't have an attribute for buttons that can do that. But with CSS, I can modify how my HTML is rendered, how it looks. Okay, now CSS is typically works on don't think of it as working on the attributes of the HTML because that's going to confuse you. That's not what it does. It works on the DOM, the document object model. So it actually modifies how the browser interprets that HTML into a visual element. Sounds like a lot of Greek, but let's break it down. Remember I said we have a button. If I want to make that button blue, I want to set the background color of the button to blue. So in CSS, I would say background color is blue. Literally that, English, it's a lot of English. It's purely English, right? And it actually respects words like blue, okay? That is the style sheets part of it. We're gonna create a style sheet now and play with our form. Now, the cascading part of it, of CSS, is that you can have CSS at 3 levels, right? You can have an external style sheet. You can have an internal style sheet, and you can have inline styles. And each of those has its pros and cons. But in terms of hierarchy, what is in an inline style will always override what is in an internal style sheet. And what is in an internal style sheet will always override what is in an external style sheet. That is the cascading nature. So for my button, if I set the color of my button to red in my external style sheet, and then in my internal styles, I set the color to green, and in my inline style, I set the color to blue. When that button shows up in the browser, it will show as blue because the inline style has precedence over the internal, which has precedence over the external. So the final color that we recognize is the blue. Okay, let's play with it. So the way CSS styles work, right? And we're going to start off with just learning the syntax for CSS. So I'm going to open up my app.component.css. app.component.sass, right? That is Sass. Don't worry about that. You can write pure CSS in here. It will work. And then what we're going to do is, you see my HTML here. Let's come to this form. Let's start off. No, let's start with the H1. Let's play with our H1. The way you write CSS is you first specify what's called a selector. A selector is what in your HTML do you want to style. In this case, we want to style the element H1, right? So here in our CSS, and as soon as I can get Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I want to make sure that I didn't completely. Yeah, let me see what's going on with my computer. Very unusual. All right, it's coming back. It's recovering. Can you see my mouse moving? Can you see my screen? Hello?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay. Is my mouse moving on my screen or is it full?
Visible. Yeah, it's moving, but it's
Okay. All right. So we're coming back and hold on 1 second. Well, while we're waiting for that, I can keep talking to it and then once my screen responds. So we have what's called a selector. And a selector is how you define what in your HTML. And I have some of the. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. So I was talking about, and I was wondering why, this class is super silent. Like everyone's really quiet and paying attention. So, all right. Yeah, I close this file. Let me just close Windows to be clear. All right. I'm going to launch it again. Okay. So I was saying that you have what we call selectors, right? And a selector is how you define what you want to style, right? So if I want to style the H1 tag, my selector would be H1. The way that works though is that wherever there's an H1 on my page, it will style every H1, right? It won't style only one specific one. To style every H1. So when you use an element selector, it styles every element of that kind that it finds. I would demonstrate that. Let's play with that. So I'm going to open up this SCSS file. And this is how you use a selector. If I say H1 here, with CSS, you write it almost as if you're writing a block of code. So you say the selector, and then you open and close parentheses. Let me make a slight change here. Just to make it easier. And confirm, I'm still recording. All right. So I'm going to make a slight change here. I'm going to change my style setup. And this is in the angular.json file. I'm going to come here. I'm going to open up this angular.json. And I'm going to find the CSS. All right. And so my styles are going to be CSS. I'm changing to, so style sheets are usually CSS, right? The style sheet files are usually .css for cascading style sheets. So let me look for this. Style, I'm going to use CSS here. Let me just make sure. All right. Okay, so that's done. And then this file here, I'm going to rename this here to .css here. Right. And then one other thing, this file here, I'm going to rename that file as well to CSS. Okay. All right. So we'll pick up here. And I'm doing that because I want the code hinting to happen. Right. So that's my style CSS file. And so what I want to do now is I want to make my H1 red. So I'm going to say color red. And this literally is how you define an attribute. And it's not an attribute per se, but in CSS you still call it an attribute. But this is different from an HTML attribute. Because if I come here, let me run this. So NGS, right? I'm gonna run that, start my server. And then we can come back here to my application. I can refresh this. And you see that's made it red. But I did that with my style sheets, right? If I come to HTML, here, I don't have a color attribute. That I can put on here to make it blue. Right? If I take away my style here, I'm going to just delete this. I save that. And let me do this differently. Let me have it so it starts. I'm going to cut that. Kill this. Control C. Open. All right. You see, I put color equals blue, and nothing happened. So I'm just using that to show you that the attribute in CSS does not map to an HTML attribute. There's no direct mapping there. Okay. The CSS color attribute it's a CSS color attribute. It just tells the browser that, hey, for whatever that is, set the text color, whatever color you specify. So if I come here and I say color blue, and I save this, right? And I refresh this. Sorry. I think Angular is monitoring my CSS. Yeah. Oh. You see that right there? That's blue. Okay. I need to check one thing here. Any questions so far? Or, I mean, I'm hoping we're following so far.
I'm wondering how you mapped this external CSS to the HTML.
So I didn't have to map it because it's an internal Angular structure.
Okay, so
right.
So you just by naming the file with the same name .css, it's already automatically mapped.
And yes, Angular automatically builds it. So when it does this building here, if you look at the build messages here, look at it. You see that? You see styles?
What I'm basically asking is, what did you tell Angular to do in order to create that? Because that file doesn't exist on our It does.
It does. Yep.
The CSS file.
No, it's gonna exist as an SASS file.
Okay. So how did you change it to CSS?
I just renamed it. But there's there's certain configuration and stuff that you have to do. Yes. Now the one thing I'm trying to fix right now, and just give me 1 second, is because Angular is not tracking changes to this CSS file. So I'm trying to make sure that it actually is tracking changes to it. Because normally when I change this file here, I expect the screen to reload, but I just noticed it's not. So if I change this to red, right here, and I save it, you can see it's not rebuilding, which it should. So just give me 1 second. Let me debug that for a second.
Okay.
Right. Not reload. Okay. You know what? I'll change it back to SCSS, and then it's gonna be kind of what we had before, because I set up the Angular application with SCSS, so let me just change it back, and I will pick it up. So let me just change all these references here to SCSS. And SAS. Okay. All right. And then close this. Close this. I'm going to rename this file here. Okay. should be style. CSS there. Okay. All right. Let's run our server again. Here. Okay. I'm going to use a different style for the CSS here, right? Just so that we don't have to deal with Sass. The reason I say I changed it to CSS is what I'm avoiding. What I was doing right there, right, is part of Angular's core structure. Don't worry about it for now, because what I want you to learn is CSS. I don't want you to learn the technical mechanizations of how it happens. Let's come into this HTML. And what we're going to do is we're going to work with internal CSS. Remember I said there's external, where it's in an external file, which is what this was simulating. Let's work with internal CSS. Yes.
Does CSS exist outside of HTML?
CSS knows, because CSS styles HTML. You have to have HTML for CSS to work. You can write all the CSS you want. If there's no element to be styled, nothing's going to happen, because CSS does not create elements. Well, correction, it can in a way, but it always requires an element, right? You have to have a selector of an existing element. So CSS will not invent an element that does not exist. It can create content, or can create a fake shadow element next to an element, but there must be an element that you're referencing, which is why you must have a selector, and your selector must match something in the DOM, okay? And when I say DOM, think of it like HTML, like something in your HTML, okay? So to write internal CSS, use the CSS, the style sheets, oh sorry, the styles tag. So you say style, right? And then here I can now say H1, I can say color blue. Save that. Now I'm gonna have to rerun this so that we can okay, and that now works. So now I can change this. I'm just going to change this color to red and save that. And you can see that. Okay. I can add another attribute now, and I can say font size 10 pixels. And that sets our font size. It's really small now. If I want to make it really huge, I can say the font size 100 pixels. Right? I can say text decoration underline. But it's underlined, right? I can say box shadow. Right? 0, 0, 10 pixel, and I want it to be black. I can just say black. I save that. If it's a shadow, or essentially glow around the H1. Okay? I can say background color, or just background yellow. All right? This is CSS at work, but this is an internal style sheet. It is called an internal style sheet because it is CSS written inside a style tag. And I can do the same thing here. I can say for my table row, right? I can say for every table row I have, Remember the selector? So I've said TR, it's going to affect every TR on my page. So TR, I can say background, orange. And I save that, and every table row in my table is now orange. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of CSS attributes that you can set that will make your page look the way you want it. This my heading one, for example. Okay, I can see that the text is too tight against the top, the side, right? On the bottom, I can come here and say, okay, I want you to have a padding, right? And padding, you can say padding top, 30 pixel, right? And that puts a 30 pixel padding at the top. I can come in here and say padding left, 20 pixels. Do that, I have 20 pixel padding on the left here. I say padding bottom, it'll be 30 pixels too. And that gives me 30 pixel padding at the bottom, right? If I want the corners rounded, I can say border radius, 20 pixel. And that gives me nice rounded borders. Or I can use a percentage here. I can say border radius 50%. This has a cool effect. Look at that. All right. So this is CSS at work. This is how you define CSS. We're not going to go through every single style. I want you to just get conceptually what CSS is. And you define it with a selector. What we've done here is called an element selector. And that matches to HTML tags. Now, what if, so the example I gave earlier, that let's say I want to make my submit button, right? That's my button here, type submit. Let's say I want to make it blue. Okay, what would I do? Anyone? Can anyone make a suggestion? I want to make this submit button right here. The sign up button. That's this button here.
You create a CSS for that button.
Okay, and so what would my select?
So
what would my selector be?
Your selector would be whatever the HTML tag is.
Tell me what it is.
Give me a second.
Button?
Button?
Yeah, button.
Okay, all right. And what would my attribute, what am I styling?
Color.
Color.
You're styling the color.
Okay, so if I set the color blue, right? That's what you're saying. Let's look at that. Is that what we want?
No. So you're going to style the background.
Yeah, that's what we want.
Background.
Either the background or the, let me see. Is it, yeah. Try the background. Yeah, there we go. Right. And then you change the actual button color to white.
You can actually
something that will contrast with that blue. Actually, no, that blue is ugly. That's 1990 internet blue.
I was comfortable with the first one.
Look for some nice natural sky blue or something.
Right. We'll get there to have a better blue than that. But you see that, so we can set the background color or the background. I'll talk later. You'll see what the difference is between background and background color. Background is a shortcut. It can take many different selectors. Right. The background color can take many different attributes in one line. So, but background color is a specific one that actually changes the background color. Let me make it a background that you would like, right? So maybe a nice pastel blue, or you want it to be even bluer than that. I want to explain what that is. But this is a hex value, and you can get it in color pickers and stuff. So what is also nice about Visual Studio Code is if you don't know the hex, you can actually click on this color picker here. They'll give you a color picker once you do it.
How do you get the color picker to show?
So once you press colon here, there's a whole bunch of options here. I had the color picker show up one time earlier. There's something we just do code that would do that, but
I couldn't consistently bring it up for some reason.
yeah. So I'm just going to let's just do this. Let's go on. Figure that out. So 0066CC. It's hex. You have to make 60. So I'll just do that and have.
Okay, I figured it out. If you click on the color, if you click on the text, as if you're about to edit it, just let it be. No.
Right there. All right. Okay. So now, these are our buttons. We can say padding, right? And I'm going to use the padding shortcut, but horizontal and vertical. So vertical padding, I would say 5 pixel, right? Sorry. And 15 pixel, right? All right. So we have these styles here, but that is not our objective. Our objective was to style only this button, not all the buttons. So what needs to change is our selector. Right now we're selecting by element, and remember, like I said, it's going to select everything. All we need to do is to select a specific element, and we can do that by giving it an ID. So if I come here to this my button, I'll add an ID attribute, and I will say sign up button. Okay, and with that ID now, I can come back to my selector and change my selector and say I only want to modify sign up button. And there, if you look at my page, only sign up button is modified. This is how you do ID. Now, when I went off, I was talking and I was telling you that IDs ideally should be unique on the page. So you shouldn't have two elements that have the same ID because you won't be able to specify which one you're targeting. But the ID attribute allows you to uniquely identify each element if you want. Okay, so you put an ID on it and then you can target it in JavaScript or you can style it with CSS. Can you guys still hear me? Am I still?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. So that's what ID does. So ID is awesome. We love IDs. They can improve performance as well. If you have 1,000 elements on the page and you want to style just one of them, right? You can just use an ID as a selector. Now, what if I want to group a few elements together, right? So let's say for my table rows, let's say I have rows that I want to be dark. Maybe I want to create like a striped table, right? Alternating gray and white and gray and white, right? How would I do that? I want to style more than one row, but I don't want to style every row. I want to be able to mark a row. There's an attribute called class that allows you to do that. So let me just add one more row here. We're going to add James Jack here. And this is going to be James and Jack 3 3. This will be James. Male. Making 52. All right. So now we have 3 rows here. Now let's say I want to make rows 1 and 3 gray. How do I write the styles for that? Here's what I can do. I can say that on this row, I add a class, and I say gray. What do I do? Okay. Add a class gray to that row, right there, like that. Add a class attribute of gray. And then I come to row 3, and I also add a class gray here. All right. Of course, that class does nothing. But in my CSS, I can then provide styles for the rows that are gray. So if I say tr.gray, and I give it a background, light gray, and I save that. Look at that. The 2 rows that I gave the gray are now light gray. These 2 are orange because I specified for every row, be orange. And I added a new rule that says, well, but rows with the class gray, light gray. This is part of the cascading nature of style sheets. It starts from the top, it's cascading the style. So it's coming from the top here. Oh, every table row is orange, set to orange. Gets here, oh, every table row with the class grade set to gray, right? But think about it. This is limited because every row I want to make gray, I have to go add gray to, right? What if I wanted to make every odd row gray, right? There's a selector for that. What if I want to make every even row gray? There's a selector for that. Okay, we won't go into that today because that's more complex CSS. But just letting you know that you can use your selectors to style specific elements, to style groups of elements, or to style all of the type of elements. Okay? Any questions? Now, the last thing that I'll add to CSS before we move on is what if you want to style. Now, remember what we said about nesting is you can have elements within elements within elements, right? These are nested elements. If I wanted to only style the table rows in the body, right? How would I do that? What's the CSS selector like for that? It's actually simple. Just in the order or in the hierarchy, you just write out the hierarchy. So I want to style T-head, TR, or I want to style T-body, TR, right? So I can come here and I can say, if I come here and I say T-body, TR, that will style only the rows in the body. My header is unaffected. Now, if I wanted to style my header, I would come and say T-head, TR, and I can say background, black, color, white, right? Or let's say background, dark gray. Dark gray, color, and then. So this is CSS. This is CSS. There are a lot more styles and all of that. You will have to look up the reference. We're not going to have to go through each style, every style in class. Any questions so far? Are you lost?
The stuff about alternating even and odd, is that JavaScript, or is that something we can do only in CSS? Without,
you can do it in CSS. You can do it in CSS.
Okay. Like, I mean, without like manually labeling each and every single.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Okay.
Yes, I can show you that. Let me just show you. Now, there are what are called pseudo classes, right? Pseudo classes, and I'll show you. It's pretty cool what you can do with pseudo classes. So pseudo classes are selectors that fake the addition of classes, right? Which is why they're called pseudo classes. So let's say I want alternating rows, right? So where's my class? Okay, this is my dot gray. If I want my odd numbered rows, a pseudo class typically starts with a colon, right? And then I'll say nth child, right? And I can say even. And if I save that, hold on. I mean, I mixed up my syntax. My brain is tired today. So CSS even selector. Oh, right, yes. No, it's not nth, yes. It is nth child. Okay, let's look at it here. I'll show you that. Yeah. So, what's my T? Okay. So if I say T body and then TR nth child, did I spell this right? Even. Let's come back here. Here. And you can see that. You see that here? The even one is now gray. I can do the same thing and say my nth child odd. And when I save, voila. Now, if I come in here and add another row, let's add another row to the table so you can see. I'm going to add another row here. And let's name her Sarah Connor, right? This is 4. And make this female. And this Sarah. And this is before John Connor was born. So 22. You see that? We now have a table with alternating stripes. We don't need to do anything to each row. I can actually come here and I'll take the gray selector off. Where's the classical gray? I'll take this off. You see that that's not doing anything anymore because I don't have a CSS style for it. So that means nothing. And so what I have now is I have a selector here that says every odd row should be light gray. If you look at our odd rows, 1 and 3 are light gray. Okay, so that's a pseudo selector. Let me add one more pseudo selector that's actually cool that you may have seen. You see this button that we have here. Where's our button? Our sign up button. I want to make it turn red when I hover over it, right? there's a pseudo selector for hovering. It's a pseudo selector here for hovering. So this is the button. I'm hovering, nothing's happening. What I want to do is when I hover over my sign up button, which is this, I want it to turn red. So I'm going to say pound sign up button on the pseudo selector hover. And that allows me to style what happens when I hover. So background, red, right, box shadow, 0, 0, 10 pixel, black. Let me use the word black. When I do that, now if I hover over this, look at that. So it now has a hover state. It didn't have that before. I can make the color text, color black. And I'll change the distance of the shadow to 5 pixels. And now, you see that? So that is CSS. This is purely CSS, no JavaScript whatsoever.
I noticed that with the box shadow, it's kind of giving it a bevel, like making it look like a 3D object. Is that the natural, what's it called, or did you have to code that too?
That is why I added the shadow, because I wanted that effect. So you know, shadows raise things.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So in design, it's called the light effect. I don't expect everyone here to be a designer, but in designing, especially like web design and software design, it's called the light effect, and it essentially raises it up. Because once something is elevated, it casts, and there's light, it casts a shadow. So it just gives that, it's a visual illusion that you have a shadow, and the shadow here, all right, if I moved the shadow, right, which is what I'm going to do here, I made it a glow, which is why I set it to be. Now I've moved it. You see that? So it now looks like it is, the shadow is now off. If I wanted to make it even more dramatic, I could do 5 pixel here, 5 pixel here, and it'll be more, it now gives directionality to the light. You see that? And maybe I do dark gray, and I'm going to push it further away, 15 pixels, 15 pixels. And I'm going to increase the blur of it again, the fade of it. Okay. Do that. 5. Let's see. Okay, so this is what you can do with CSS. You see now, I put that shadow, which makes it feel as if it's high off the page, right? Makes it look like it's high off the page, right? Now, I can make it move when I hover by giving it a margin. Margin left. Ten pixel. This is gonna bump it 10 pixels to the right. See that? See, feel like it jumped off. You see that? It's all a visual trick. But here I have what looks almost like animation. Yeah. And you can do animation in CSS, but that's advanced CSS. You can do keyframe animation. That's a concept we're not even going to look at in this course. Okay. But that is CSS. That's the beauty of CSS. You can style your page. So here's what we've done. We've gone from HTML, which is just putting stuff on the page, laying out elements, right? No real form to it. I mean, apart from the order and arrangement of it. We've gone from that to now actually trying to make it look pretty. CSS is our tool for making it look pretty. So what we'll do, right? What we'll do, and then I'll give you a command that is going to be like a homework. But before I give you that, let's see if in 5 minutes I can make this form look decent. And let's talk through making it look decent. So if we look at what we have right now, we have labels. Remember, these are labels and these are inputs, right? These are labels and these are inputs. Okay. First thing, Wale, you mentioned when I first did this on Monday that they were close together, right?
Yes. Yes.
Let's put some spacing between the label and the input. So if we look at the markup and how it's structured, we have the label first, and then we have the input coming after it. So to space this out a little, we can just put a margin, a right margin for the label. If we say label, right? We say margin right, 10 pixel, right? What did I do? I didn't spell something right there. All right. If I say margin right, 10 pixels, look at that. Spaced it out already. Now, if we look, the lines are kind of squashed together, right? Very tight on top of each other. So if we look at our form structure, we have divs inside the form, right? And then each line of our form is a div. So let's see if we can do something nice about that. So if we say form, right, div, and we can say padding, right? And let's use the shortcut, which is vertical padding and horizontal padding. That's the syntax for the shortcut. So if we say our vertical padding is 10 pixels, and our horizontal padding is 5 pixels. Look at that. Spaced it out. Okay. Now, okay, let's say we want all these to be aligned. An easy way to do that is to make all the labels the same width, right? So these labels that we have here, we can again say minimum width for the label, 150 pixels, right? But the problem, the reason it was ignored is because our labels are inline elements. So we need to make them behave as if they can have width. So we're going to make them display inline block. And look at what's happened. Our form already is looking a lot better, has nice spacing in it and everything. Our buttons need some spacing too, but okay. Before we go to our buttons, let's put a border around our form, right? So we can come here and say for our form, right? We want a border. I want it to be 1 pixel, a solid line, and light gray. That gives our form. See the border around it? And we can say each of these divs, we can say background, light gray. And you notice light gray, you can spell it American or British, which is accept whichever spelling. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay, and let's put some spacing between our forms. So margin, similar to padding, vertical, horizontal. So we'll say 5 pixels. And if we just say 5 pixels, then vertical and horizontal will be 5 pixels. And there. So we've gone from it looking like total crap to where it's actually marketable. MTN could buy this, or Sprint. And then we have the nice yellow up there. So this is CSS. And you can see the impact it's had on the HTML is pretty dramatic. So when you want to do CSS, there's always references. Like there's reference, use the reference, okay? There's reference for everything, height and width, padding, margins, borders, backgrounds. If you want to do a gradient background, you can say gradient from one color to the other. So like our, where's our divs, right? Form div, background. If you wanted to do a gradient, you can say if it's linear gradient, right? And what we're going to do is go from light gray to white. I get my syntax right. Let's save that. I come back to look at my lovely page, and now have a gradient on them. And you can gradient from any color to any color, and go from light gray to dark gray. Let's save that. There, use it to a kind of a 3D effect.
Can you specify the direction of the gradient?
Yes, you can, because there are other types of gradients that you can do. But yes, you can do a gradient direction. I think if you come here to look at gradients, and you can specify opacity and all kinds of stuff. There's like, you can do really complex designs, and also, like I said, keyframe animation with CSS. And everything, you just write it out like this. You can change fonts, you can change font styles, font direction, all kinds of stuff. And this is not JavaScript. Okay. So, do we all understand CSS to an extent?
Yes.
The reference, yes, the reference is out there. If you just think it, and you can come here and look for, now you need to be able to think about, okay, what it is that you want to do. Now, very often, you work off of a design. Okay, and I'm going to show you a couple of tricks right now. If I look at this page, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what they did to get this button looking like this. You can right click on it and say inspect. And you know what you see on the right here? All the styles they use for that button. So I literally can come here and copy this here. And I'll come here to, where's my button? My submit button that I styled, right? Where is it? This one, right? Sign up button. And I'll paste that there. And if I come to my page, a sign up button is their same shade of green and white. Now, it doesn't have the same padding, but hey, I can still come here and inspect it some more to see, okay, what do they do? You see there's another set of styles there. And I can look all the way, I can see the padding and stuff that they did there, right? So I can copy this, come here, and add more of their styles. And voila, it's starting to look kind of like their stuff, right? See that? Starting to look like it. It now has the same left, right pattern. I haven't gotten the right yet, but on the left perspective and the top. So that's, you can do that. You can inspect anything that you see that's pretty on a website. If we come here, let's say we come here, and I love this, their button. I'm like, wow, this is a nice gradient. I right click on it, inspect it, and the CSS is there. And you can see that gradient right there. I come in here, and I can still, well, not still, borrow. I'm going to borrow all of these button styles. I mean, I'm not stealing it because they still have it, right? You know, so there you have it. You know, sharing is caring. So thank you, Amazon. Paste all those styles. It's way better than I could have made by myself. And I come back to my page, and voila! You see my button? And see the Amazon button? Signing, the same thing. And there's no laws against it. You know? And I have, mine is a little too short, and I got more going on with mine because I have that nice, you know, shadow thing going. But look at my button. So that's CSS, and that's how you can find, if you see something you like, you can borrow it. There's no laws against it. You're not infringing on any copyright or anything. There's no copyright on web markup. Okay? There's copyright on content. You can steal their text. But like if you see this and you're like, oh, I like how they did this. I would like to do this for my table styles. You right click on it, you inspect it, and you see the styles there. And you can see what they did. Oh, that's the background color they have. And this is how, this is a good way to learn CSS. You can look at this and see how they came up with that look. Okay? The last thing, as far as CSS is concerned, so what we did now is what we call an internal style sheet. How would you do CSS inline? I can come here, and on one of my rows, I can add a style attribute. And in here, I put my CSS. And I can say color green. And you see that Visual Studio Code recognizes. Okay. On one hand, I forgot to mention, every CSS directive that you give, you have to end with a semicolon. If you don't, crazy things will happen. So you have to make sure each line is terminated with a semicolon. So for JavaScript and CSS, each line must be terminated with a semicolon, not the block. Don't put a semicolon here or here, but each directive. Okay. And when I come back here, I put an inline CSS there that says my text is green. Look at it. That table now has green text. Okay. So if you want to practice, I'll recommend find a page, right? And try to imitate the styles. Like you can pick anything. And I'll say let that be our homework till we meet again on Monday. So you have the rest of the week and the weekend. And then on Monday, let's see what people can do. Or play with it. You know, look for any website. Just pull up, you see a site. Try to see what they did. And, or try to come up with your own. Whichever way. If you're more creative, try to design something and see what you can come up with. All right. The last thing I want to touch on, and that is an Angular thing, and this is going to take 1 minute. So far, we've been working on the app component, right? No, I'll leave that because there's more additions to it. Maybe there's with it. Let's play around with it. You can play around with it in the app component. You don't have to commit and push. All right, you can just do it on your local, keep it local to yourself. But let's have at it. I'm going to commit this that I have and push it so you have all these samples and the markup in place. You don't have to reinvent it. Okay. So before we close, any questions?
We're hoping we can figure out how the Angular thing works to pair the HTML and the CSS and all that stuff. I think that's for much later, right?
We modify this. Did you do it?
Yes, you can modify this. Now the details of how Angular combines them, you don't care. And I would say don't even bother with that.
Oh, nice.
Now,
cool.
Yeah, you don't care because Angular will do it. It will do it for you. You don't really care.
What I'm trying to say is, like, let's say I create a new web app, right?
Yes.
The Angular will do all that for me, right?
Yes, because I haven't had to do anything to make it work.
Beautiful.
Angular will do all that for you.
Beautiful.
Right. So, yes. So please take this file, play with it, tweak it, do everything. The next class will be pure Angular. We're going to focus on Angular. Now we know how to do CSS, we know HTML, we know attributes and all. Time to jump back into JavaScript and start really, really doing some stuff. We're going to start building out the interactivity, and the objective for the next class will be to complete that form, have it looking good, and have it submitting to the REST endpoint that the backend squad is working on. Okay, so for now, for the front end, go ahead and have at the CSS. Get comfortable with it, because from this point on, I'm just going to be busting CSS if we need to bust CSS. There won't be much time to explain, right? So just be like, okay, let's knock this together and move on. Okay, we'll focus on Angular from this point forward. Any questions, concerns, heartburn, headache?
Hi, this is Bim. I've got an error anytime I'm trying to do a git pull. It's the error code throws something about package-lock.json.
Okay, hold on that. Actually, no, don't hold on it because many people will have that error. Just delete your package lock.json.
So just go right click and delete.
Yes, delete the one you have, and then you do git pull and fine. Okay, this should be the only time you will have that problem. You shouldn't have that problem.
Okay.
Anymore.
And now I can do a git pull?
Yep.
So,
okay. Now, before I stop the recording, any questions relating to HTML and CSS? Then I'll stop the recording and we can deal with environment issues.
so what you were doing just now, like the way you were editing the forms, I was expecting that as you were doing it, it will be updating in real time and we'll be able to view it ourselves. But it looks like we're stuck at the point where we stopped at the last class. So I'm just wondering, do you push it to us and then we pull? How does that happen? Hello?
Yes. So I have to do a git. I have to commit the changes and push it.
Okay.
And then you have to pull before you see my changes. But yes, all my changes are on my local computer, right?
I get you.
It's all on my local computer, so there's no connection between our computers.
Okay. The other question I had for you was, the other file that you asked us to download and kind of play with, you know, you gave us some instructions in Slack and said if you want to just create like your own web and maybe start playing, making tables and everything.
Yeah. That's a different squad. Yes,
Is
that's
that
a
it?
different
Oh,
squad.
it's not front end. Oh, okay. I don't know.
The
I'm
back end
mixing
squad.
things up then. Okay.
Yes,
Okay. Sorry
that's the
about
back end squad. Yes.
Okay. So the only thing we do here is really just working with this and trying to see if we can reproduce what you've done, basically.
Well, I'm going to push this so you have exactly what I've done. What I
Yeah,
want you
but
to
how
do is
do we now create a different? I'm just thinking, you know, you've done a finished product. How can we recreate what you've done in a different file and try to kind of just walk through it?
Right. So there are two things that I asked you to do, right? I want you to play with CSS. So you can take what I've done and tweak it and whatever, right? Do more with it. Do different kinds of gradients, change, like you can blow it up to your heart's content, but also when you go around the web and you see a web page or a website and you're like, wow, this is pretty. Now I want you to start thinking of, I wonder how they got it to look like that. And I showed you how to inspect the page and see the CSS that they used.
Okay.
And I want you to see if you can, if you can recreate it. So I did the example of this button on Amazon. I was like, that's a nice button, right?
Yeah.
I want to have a button like this. So I inspected it, got their CSS, and came in and used it. And now I have that same kind of button. Okay. Even though mine has a different hover state. But I want you to do that because the best way to learn, right, is to look at what others have done. And you will learn professional quality CSS because the people that designed this have been doing it for years. I have degrees in it, and that's what they do. So if you copy what they do, and don't just copy it, like look at it to understand what it is that they did. How did they get the text to be in the center like this? How did they get all this space side by side? One of the things that you can do in this inspector here is you can actually uncheck, you can disable certain CSS directives there and see the effect. So here I can say, okay, let me remove this. Oh, okay, that's what that does. It just adds the line around it, right? Because it's a border color, right? Right? Okay, let's see. If I remove the background, right? Oh, there's a background image there. Huh. Now I can, the background color, right? So you can actually play and, you know, uncheck stuff. Oh, okay, that's where I killed it. And I'm like, okay, so this is the border color. And this is the background image. So that gradient is actually a background image, not a gradient. Oh, no, it's actually, they use the linear gradient. So it is a linear gradient. It's a background image. You get what I mean? And you can examine it. What's this display inline block? If I take it off, what does it do? Ah, that's how they got it to be all white if they use inline block. So you can do that and you will essentially reverse engineer that.
Okay. So the question I was trying to sorry, the question I was trying to ask is, like, while you were working, I was also working on mine and saving so that I could see the changes. Now, if I do a git pull, is that all I need to do, or do I need to delete my file? I can't remember.
So we will have a conflict if we edited the same line, right? So if you feel strongly about the stuff that you've done, right, you can merge and have both mine and yours, or you keep the parts of mine that you want and the parts of yours that you want. That's a different thing that we're gonna, I mean, I wasn't planning to do conflict, to work on git conflict resolution yet, but you will have to resolve the merge conflicts. Next class, when I teach you how to create Angular components, you'll be able to actually create your own component whenever you want, right? For now, in the after party, and once we end this now, in the after party, we'll look at we'll look at setting up your own Angular project, right? So that you can do whatever you want without worrying about pulling them. You get what I mean? So we'll do that right now in the after party so people can use that to play to their heart's content.
That sounds like something that should be in an official class, though.
Well,
wait till next week.
We already did creating an Angular project in the last class.
Oh, gotcha.
So you can go watch that video. But I'm saying we'll just do it here so that if anybody needs a refresher on that, we'll just do it again. All right. But we've already done that. We created a new Angular project in the last class. Okay. All right. Any other questions related to HTML and CSS? All right. Thanks, everyone. I will stop the recording and we can have an after party for just a few minutes. I'm going to have to run shortly. Stop recording.